What's going on, gamers? My name is John with Gamester81.com, and in this episode I'll be reviewing Nintendo Virtual Boy. Now personally, I really like the Nintendo Virtual Boy. I think it's very unique, way ahead of its time when it came out, but many will consider Nintendo Virtual Boy to be Nintendo's biggest failure as far as systems go, and that's true when you look at the numbers and look at how it fared in the markets that it came out in. A little history about the Virtual Boy itself. It came out and was released in North America on August 14th, 1995. Retailed for $180 US. If you include inflation in today's dollars, that's roughly $272 US. So it wasn't cheap when it came out. It was released in Japan a month earlier in July 1995. Was never released in the PAL markets, unfortunately. Only 22 games were released for the Virtual Boy. 14 were released in the North American market. Cool thing about the Virtual Boy, it is region free, meaning you can play games on both systems. So you can play this, there's no region lock, which is really nice. So you can play a lot of Japanese titles on North American systems, which is great. I personally have all 14 North American titles, so it's not too difficult to complete the collection. There are a few that are harder to find. Jack Brothers being one of them. It will set you for a loose cart. It will set you back $100 or more. Now, to complete a 22 game Japanese collection, it is more difficult. A lot of those games sell for significantly a lot more money, but it is possible. So the library isn't obviously as big as you would get with the Super Nintendo, obviously the Game Boy. The Virtual Boy came out kind of a weird time because virtual reality was supposed to be huge in the 90s. It was supposed to be the next big thing in the future. Never really came to be, but Nintendo wanted to kind of capitalize on the hype for virtual reality, so they created a system to kind of go along with that, which ended up being the Virtual Boy. In addition, Nintendo was working on the Nintendo 64, or the Ultra 64 at this time. It didn't come out until 1996, but they had really pushed it, and Nintendo Power was really promoting it. The system itself is kind of awkward because I don't necessarily consider it a system, like a home system. I don't necessarily consider it a handheld. It's kind of both. It runs off of batteries. There is an AC adapter for it as well, but it's certainly not portable, as you can see from the size. It is substantial in size. It's fairly heavy, not too bad, but the biggest thing about the Virtual Boy to me, it's awkward to play. You look, it comes with the visor strap here, and it comes with the remote. It has a stand, which is nice, but to play it, you go like this, and you end up getting kind of neck pains, and you obviously can't stand up and play. I find the easiest way to play my Virtual Boy is actually laying on my back when I'm on my bed or something like that. That's the easiest way to play it, but there's no strap to strap around your head. There's nothing to keep it on there. This visor actually comes off so you can clean it. It is kind of unique. Many people found it kind of awkward to play, myself being kind of included, to be quite honest with you. The Virtual Boy itself was developed by Gunpei Yokoi for Nintendo, and Gunpei Yokoi was a veteran at Nintendo. He had created very successful products for Nintendo, including the successful line of Game & Watches. He created the Nintendo Game Boy. He had worked with creating Rob the Robot. He helped develop Metroid series, Kid Icarus series. So he had a lot of success with Nintendo. Gunpei Yokoi himself admitted afterwards that after the Virtual Boy was released, and that didn't do very well, that it was a release before it was really ready. It was kind of rushed to the market by Nintendo because Nintendo wanted to get it to the market before the N64 was released. So really it wasn't necessarily a finished product. Another big downfall for the Virtual Boy, besides being awkward to play, was the fact that the Virtual Boy, it was only one color, and that was red. And they did that for cost reasons. They also made it LED, not LCD, because LED was less expensive to create. And the reason they decided to do a red color instead of any other color, because there's more shades of red and it was more bright and I guess easier to the eyes. But a lot of people at the time were complaining about the Game Boy being one color, black and white. So when the Virtual Boy was released, only being in red, a lot of gamers were kind of upset about that. But Nintendo decided to do that to cut costs, because even though 180 was a lot, it would have been a lot more expensive to do it in LCD and full color than it was just to do in one red color. So personally, I like the graphics. It uses kind of a parallax effect where it's a 3D. It uses mirrors, and so it appears 3D. The 3D to me is more vivid than like in a 3DS, for example. There's a lot more depth 3D. The games, I think, look really, really cool. I really wish that the Virtual Boy had a longer shelf life. Unfortunately, by 1986, they discontinued the Virtual Boy. The last US game released for the Virtual Boy was 3D Tetris, but it's one of those systems that a lot of people kind of overlook. It is a collector's item because only 770,000 of these units were actually released. Now, another thing I want to say about the Virtual Boy is that Nintendo had put a lot of money and invested a lot of time with Blockbuster, and they pushed people to go rent the system for $10. And so it came with a nice plastic case, and you could actually rent the Virtual Boy and test it, so to speak, for $10. Now, this was also the biggest Achilles heel for Virtual Boy because a lot of gamers did that. They tested for $10 and just determined that they didn't like it. So that would kind of end up being a big downfall for Nintendo, but it was kind of cool that they'd worked with Blockbuster to have it readily available for gamers to at least test out for only $10. When Nintendo was first promoting the Virtual Boy before it was released and they had just announced it, they claimed that you could immerse yourself into your own universe. And they claimed kind of that it was like a virtual reality experience, which isn't necessarily the case with the Virtual Boy. Now, obviously, with emulations nowadays, you can get Virtual Boy games on ROMs and emulators and stuff like that. But obviously, it's a completely different experience because with emulations, you don't get the 3D effect, which to me adds so much more to the gaming experience as a whole. So if you're interested in getting a Virtual Boy, definitely check them out. There's some really noteworthy games available for the system. Now I'm going to show you some games I own. These are North American titles I own. I have all 14, so let me go through these real quick for you guys. Galactic Pinball, if you like pinball games, this is a really fun game to check out. Telero Boxer, this is a boxing game, uses both directional, both D-pads. I'm not a big fan of this game, to be honest with you. Nestor's Funky Bowling, this is the only game that Nestor, who was the character in Nintendo Power, ever starred in. It's a typical bowling game. Red Alarm is kind of like a Star Fox style game. It uses lines. It kind of gets confusing. The 3D gets really confusing. 3D Tetris. If you're a big fan of Tetris, check this game out. It's a lot of fun to play. It's done in it's like a 3D environment, so not only have to the lines to worry about, you have the whole 3D square to worry about as well. You got Virtual Golfer. This is just golf. Really fun golf game. Panic Bomber. I'm not a big fan of this game. This is a puzzle game. Not a huge fan of. Wario Land, one of the better platforming games. In fact, it's one of the few platforming games for the system. This uses Wario. Really fun game, a must-own for the system. Waterworld, one of the harder games to find, based on the movie Waterworld. The movie wasn't very good, neither is the game. It was supposed to be multiplayer, and that's another thing. The system was supposed to come out with link cables so you can play multiplayer. Those never end up coming out, but this is one of the few games that was supposed to be developed before that, and this was developed and released by Ocean, one of the few third-party companies that would release games for the Virtual Boy. Mario Clash plays very similar to the original Mario Brothers in the arcade in a 3D environment, very cool. Virtual League Baseball, it's a baseball game. Mario Tennis was a pack-in game for the Virtual Boy. Awesome game, one of my favorites for the system. This is Jack Brothers, this is by Atlas, another third-party company to release game for it. The hardest game to find, North American game anyway. Really fun top-down, kind of a shooting game. It's really fun though, I really recommend it. And they use their mascot, the Jack Brothers, it's pretty cool. Vertical Force, which is a shooter, it's a pretty decent game. And that's all 14 released games for the North American. Let me show you my Japanese games I have. I don't have all 22, but I'll show you what I do have. This is Virtual Fishing. Virtual Fishing is kind of boring, to be honest with you. The 3D looks great, but you sit there a lot of times for 10 minutes or more and nothing really happens. This is Space Squash, a really fun game. It plays very similar to Tetris. It's a back and forth game, but in a 3D environment. Really addicting game. This is Mario Tennis for the Japanese release. This is V Tetris, not to be confused with 3D Tetris. This plays very similar to the original Tetris. Not quite as good as 3D Tetris. This game, I'm probably going to butcher the name of this, but it's Mosei no Yukata, I believe. And this is the only first-person shooter for the system. It's a horror, kind of survival horror game. Really fun. It does get kind of repetitive after a while, but it's a really hard game to find. Definitely worth checking out. This is Mario Clash, Japanese Mario Clash, Japanese Vertical Force. This is and Japanese Golf. Now let me show you the box real quick. The box art, it's really cool. I really like the front. Like I said before, this is my original box I had when I grew up, bought the system. On the back, you have some items here that kind of end up changing. Wario Cruise end up being Wario Land, Mario Clash, a Red Alarm. It does have an AC adapter that you could purchase separately, so you can save batteries. It runs off 6 AA batteries, which battery life isn't too bad. That's another reason why they decided to go with the red LED, because it saved on battery life. That's it. Nothing about the connector, and talks a little bit about the Virtual Boy system itself. Now let's take a closer look at the system itself. Before I show you the system, though, I want to show you a comparison between the Japanese games and the US games. They're pretty much identical, but the artwork style was so much different. Here's a US game, Mario Tennis. Here's a Japanese Mario Tennis. You can see the artwork in Japan. I actually prefer a lot better. Again, here's a US version of Mario Clash. Here's a Japanese Mario Clash. A lot different. I like the the detail in the Japanese version. Vertical Force, pretty boring. US version. There's the Japanese version. This is by Hudson Soft, okay, another third-party company to develop games for the Virtual Boy. Now onto the system itself. It has a stand, as I mentioned before. The stand actually you can adjust. There's an adjuster here. You can spin this and lock it into place. This actually clips on and off. There's a clip here. You can clip it on and off. You can remove it. These visors actually come off. The whole idea is you can actually clean these, you know, so I guess with sweat and stuff, but they snap in and out really, really easily. Here's what you would look into when you're playing a game. This is where the controller plugs into in the very bottom there. This is a connector, this is exit, and this was, like I mentioned before, they're supposed to have an adapter for it where you can play multiplayer, and that never came out. That's where that would plug into. This is the slot where the games would plug into. The label would be down, so you plug it in, snap it in like so. Here is the volume on the lower left here. This is your headphone jack right there. It's 16-bit stereo. I actually really like the sound of the Virtual Boy. It sounds really good, and the stereo sounds really good as well. The speakers are on both sides, left and right here. Those are where the speakers are. On the top here, this is the focus. This would slide back and forth. This is where you adjust the mirrors, so you can adjust the focus. At the beginning of every game, it will ask you to adjust it, where you see the 4 dots in the corner. Now, one issue I mentioned before, this is my second version I own, is because a lot of times over time, this thing actually wears out over time and it becomes out of focus and glitchy. So you gotta be careful when you purchase the Virtual Boy. Take care of yours as well, but just over time, make sure you don't really use this too often because it does a lot of wear and tear on the machine, and there's a lot of them that are faulty. So when you're looking for a Virtual Boy to purchase, make sure you ask the seller if it actually works or not, okay? So it's really important to double check that. That's pretty base, that's it as far as the headset. It goes pretty simple. You know, it doesn't weigh too much, maybe a pound or two. It's not too heavy. Snap this back into place. As far as the controller goes, this is the controller. Now, I'm not a huge fan of the controller. It uses 2 D-pads. The whole idea is so you can control yourself in a 3D environment. Only a few games like Teleboxer and a few other ones actually utilize both D-pads. I'm not a big fan of that. This is the power on and off switch right here. Kind of interesting that it's on the controller itself. As well as the batteries. I mentioned it takes 6 AA batteries. This is where the batteries would go into. You can also replace this with an AC adapter pack if you were to purchase that. You got 2 button bumpers left and right there. BA button, just like a typical Nintendo controller has. And you have start and select. So pretty basic. You hold it. It feels pretty comfortable in the hands, but it's kind of awkward with the 2 directional pads. Now I'm going to show you some gameplay for 2 games, just to give you an example of what the graphics look like and how they play, and that is going to be Tennis and Wario Land. It's very, very difficult to capture game footage on the Virtual Boy. It's very hard to get the camera lined up so you can actually look at in the system. It just doesn't do it justice. So what I'm going to do, what I've decided to do, is show you it through emulator. It's just the best way I can show you what the games look like. It's going to be, the emulator is in 3D, so if you have a pair of these red-blue glasses, 3D glasses, be sure to use those, and it'll give you a good idea as far as what the game looks like in 3D. Otherwise, you can still see what it looks like in 2D. It's just going to be a little blurry because it's in the red-blue. I figure that's the best way to show you footage. I wish I could actually show you the actual games themselves, but again, it's very difficult to do so. Without any further ado, let's take a closer look at the games. First game I'm going to show you is Mario's Tennis for the Virtual Boy. As I mentioned before, this was a pack-in game for the Virtual Boy in North America, and one of the better games for the system, one of my favorites on the system anyway. 7 playable characters. You can choose between Mario, Luigi, Princess, Toad, Koopa, Donkey Kong Jr., and of course Yoshi. And each character doesn't have a different ability. They all play the same. You can play singles or doubles in this game as well, so you can play with the CPU. There's different tournaments you can play. A really, really fun game. This also was developed to have a link cable, so you could play 2 players with 2 different Virtual Boys, but as I mentioned before, that link cable never was released. The last game I'm going to show you for an example for now is Virtual Boy Wario Land, which is one of my favorite games for the system and regarded as one of the best games for the Virtual Boy. It's a platforming game starring Wario. This isn't his first adventure, actually. Super Mario Land 3, Wario Land came out in 1994, a year before this, for the original Game Boy. But this is a great game. I love the 3D, use of 3D in this game is fantastic. I can't speak highly enough of this game. If you own a Virtual Boy, certainly check this game out. I have a couple trivia questions for you guys related to Mario and see how well you guys know your Mario trivia. First question is, what was the very first game that Wario debuted in for Nintendo? And Wario is really regarded as a rival to Mario in many ways, but he certainly wasn't the very first rival. So my second trivia question is, what was the very first rival for Mario? And here's a hint, it's not Bowser. So if you guys know the answers to any of those questions or both, please leave a comment below. Let me know. Also interesting trivia fact is Wario Woods, which came out in 1994, was the very last Nintendo licensed game for the Nintendo Entertainment System. It's the only Nintendo Entertainment System game that has an ESRB rating on it as well, which is an interesting fact. One thing I want to mention before I conclude this review, it does have a 32-bit processor, so pretty advanced for its time. I like the games overall. I think there's a lot of potential. I know they were planning on releasing a Mario Kart game for the Virtual Boy, which I think would have been incredible. They're planning on releasing, I believe, GoldenEye for the Virtual Boy as well. So there's some really good titles that were in development that never saw the light of day. There's a homebrew market still out there for the Virtual Boy, so people are still creating their own games for it, which is great. Really recommend the Virtual Boy, guys. I mean, granted, it was really expensive when it first came out. It's only in one color, red. It's kind of awkward to play, but if you take all that aside, the system really had a lot of potential. Because it did so bad, Gunpei Yokoi ended up leaving Nintendo, and he went on to create the Wonder Swan, which is a handheld that came out later on. Thanks for watching, guys. Let me know what you guys think about the Virtual Boy. Please leave a comment below. We'll see you guys soon. Take care.